Moving into a new apartment is always an adventure. The excitement of a fresh start, the anticipation of making a new place feel like home. It's a feeling that I had looked forward to as I stepped into my new abode. Little did I know that my new beginning would soon take a horrifying turn. It all started innocently enough. I had just finished unpacking my last box, and the evening sun cast long shadows across my spacious, but oddly cheap apartment. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, and it showed. The place was dusty, and the air held a musty, stale odor. As I was inspecting the empty closets, my fingers brushed against something hard and uneven on the top shelf. I stretched to reach it, and when I pulled it down, I found myself holding an old leather-bound diary. It was the kind of diary that belonged to a bygone era, with yellowed pages and a delicate lock that seemed to have rusted shut. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to see if I could pry it open. After some fiddling, the lock finally gave way with a satisfying click. The first page bore a name written in elegant cursive: Eleanor Pembroke, 1932. It was a name that felt heavy with history. As I turned the pages, I was drawn into Eleanor's world. Her diary was filled with the everyday musings of a young woman from the 1930s. She wrote about her dreams, her hopes, and her mundane daily activities. It was like stepping back in time. But as I delved deeper into the diary, I noticed something strange. The entries became increasingly erratic and disjointed. Eleanor's handwriting grew shaky, and her words took on an unsettling tone. She wrote of a presence in the apartment, of something that watched her from the shadows. I chalked it up to the imaginings of a young woman, perhaps suffering from some form of mental illness. But as I continued reading, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Eleanor's story than met the eye. One entry, in particular, sent shivers down my spine. It read, "It watches me, it waits. I hear whispers in the walls, voices that call my name in the dead of night. I dare not look into the mirrors, for I fear what I might see. There is something malevolent in this place, something that hungers for my soul." I couldn't help but glance around my apartment, feeling an irrational sense of unease. I tried to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, but the diary's grip on my curiosity was unrelenting. The entries continued to deteriorate, descending into madness. Eleanor wrote of sleepless nights, of shadows that moved on their own accord, and of a pervasive sense of dread that hung over her like a shroud. As I reached the final pages of the diary, the entries abruptly stopped. The last page contained a single chilling sentence. "It's inside me now. There's no escape. It will come for you too." I closed the diary with trembling hands, a cold sweat breaking out on my brow. The words I had just read felt like a curse, a dire warning from the past. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had uncovered something sinister, something that had never left this apartment. But I told myself it was just a diary, the ramblings of a troubled mind from a different era. I placed it back on the top shelf and tried to put it out of my mind. Little did I know that Eleanor's words were a harbinger of the horrors that awaited me in my new home. As the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in my new apartment. Strange occurrences began to pile up, each one more unsettling than the last. It started with subtle things: a whispering breeze that rustled the curtains in a closed room, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and an unshakable feeling of being watched. I dismissed these incidents as mere figments of my imagination, the natural unease that comes with moving into a new place. But then the nightmares began. Night after night, I found myself in a dark, oppressive place, a place that felt oddly familiar. It was as if I was experiencing Eleanor's torment firsthand. I could hear the whispers in the walls, the voices that called my name, and the malevolent presence that lurked just out of sight. Each morning, I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if Eleanor's anguish had seeped into my very soul, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was not alone in my apartment. Things took a more sinister turn when objects in my apartment began to move on their own. I would leave a chair in one corner of the room and return to find it on the opposite side. Books would fall from their shelves without explanation, and the temperature in certain rooms would drop dramatically, even on the hottest of days. The mirrors in the apartment became a source of dread. I would catch glimpses of something lurking in the reflections, dark, indistinct figures that seemed to watch my every move. It was as if the boundary between the living and the dead had blurred, and Eleanor's presence had become a malevolent force in my life. I couldn't deny it any longer. The diary's warning had become a chilling reality, and I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I needed answers, and the diary held the key. I retrieved the diary from the top shelf and began to read it once more, searching for clues that might explain the haunting that had taken hold of my life. The later entries, the ones filled with madness and despair, seemed to resonate with my own experiences. "It knows my thoughts. It whispers in my ear," Eleanor had written. "I've tried to leave this place, but it won't let me go. There is no escape, no respite from the torment." The diary had become a portal to the past, a connection between Eleanor's suffering and my own. But it offered no solutions, no way to break the cycle of terror that had consumed my life. Desperation led me to seek out the building's history. I scoured archives and spoke to longtime residents of the neighborhood, hoping to uncover some dark secret that might explain the haunting. What I discovered sent a chill down my spine. It turned out that the apartment building had a sordid history, one that had been buried beneath layers of time. Decades ago, it had been a boarding house for troubled women suffering from various mental illnesses who had been abandoned by their families. Eleanor Pembroke had been one of them. As I delved deeper into the records, I found Eleanor's name on the list of former residents. She had been admitted to the boarding house in 1932, the same year as her diary's last entry. The records painted a grim picture of neglect and mistreatment, a place where the vulnerable were left to suffer in silence. It was then that I realized the horrifying truth. Eleanor's torment had not been a product of her imagination. It had been a product of the boarding house's cruel and inhumane treatment. The malevolent force that had taken root in my apartment was a manifestation of the suffering and despair that had permeated the building for decades. But understanding the source of the haunting did little to alleviate my terror. If anything, it made the situation even more dire. I was not dealing with a simple ghost or spirit. I was dealing with a malevolent force that had been festering for generations, a force that had claimed Eleanor and now sought to claim me. I knew I had to confront the presence that had invaded my life, to put an end to the cycle of suffering that had plagued the apartment for so long. But I had no idea how to banish such a malevolent force, and the diary offered no guidance. As the days turned into months, the haunting intensified. The malevolent presence seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, its grip on my life becoming ever more suffocating. It whispered in my ear, called my name in the dead of night, and moved objects with increasing violence. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped in a nightmare that had no end. I had no choice but to confront the malevolent force head-on, to seek out a way to banish it from my life once and for all. But I knew that the battle ahead would be a perilous one, a struggle against a darkness that had plagued the apartment for generations. I could only hope that I had the strength and determination to face the horrors that awaited me and put an end to the cycle of suffering that had claimed so many before me. I embarked on a quest to uncover the truth about the malevolent force that had taken hold of my apartment. Armed with the diary's cryptic entries and the knowledge of the building's dark history, I sought answers that might help me banish the haunting that had consumed my life. My journey began with a visit to the local historical society. There, I combed through dusty archives and spoke to elderly residents who had lived in the neighborhood for generations. It was a long and arduous process, but I was determined to unearth any information that could help me understand the malevolent force's origins. What I discovered was a chilling tale of abuse and suffering. The boarding house that had once occupied the building had been a house of horrors for the women who sought refuge within its walls. The residents had been subjected to cruel treatments, experimental therapies, and neglect that bordered on cruelty. It was a place where the vulnerable were left to languish, their cries for help going unanswered. Eleanor Pembroke's story had been tragically common. She had been admitted to the boarding house in 1932, a young woman grappling with her own demons. Her diary had borne witness to the horrors she had endured, the malevolent force that had tormented her, and her desperate attempts to escape. But Eleanor had not been the only one. The boarding house's dark history was filled with stories of residents who had met tragic ends, suicides, mysterious disappearances, and untimely deaths. It was as if the malevolent force had claimed them one by one, leaving a trail of suffering and despair in its wake. Armed with this knowledge, I delved deeper into the diary, searching for any clues that might help me confront the malevolent force. Eleanor's later entries, the ones filled with madness and desperation, seemed to hold the key. "It knows my thoughts. It whispers in my ear," she had written. "I try to leave this place, but it won't let me go. There is no escape, no respite from the torment." It was clear that Eleanor had been tormented by a malevolent presence that had refused to release its grip on her. Her desperate attempts to escape had been in vain, and she had ultimately succumbed to the darkness that had consumed her. I couldn't help but draw parallels between Eleanor's torment and my own experiences in the apartment. The malevolent force had whispered in my ear, called my name in the dead of night, and moved objects with increasing violence. It was as if Eleanor's suffering had transcended time, reaching out to claim me as its next victim. But I was determined not to meet the same fate as Eleanor. Armed with my newfound knowledge, I sought out the help of paranormal experts, psychics, and mediums, anyone who might possess the knowledge and abilities to confront the malevolent force. Their investigations revealed a chilling truth. The malevolent force was not confined to my apartment alone. It had spread throughout the building, a malevolent presence that defied all attempts to banish it. It seemed to feed on fear and despair, growing stronger with each passing day. I knew that confronting the malevolent force would not be easy. It was a battle against a darkness that had plagued the apartment for generations, a force that had claimed countless victims. But I was determined to put an end to the suffering, to break the cycle of torment that had consumed so many lives. With the help of the paranormal experts, we conducted a series of rituals and ceremonies to confront the malevolent force. We recited incantations, lit candles, and offered prayers in the hopes of banishing the darkness that had taken hold of the building. But the malevolent force was not so easily defeated. It fought back with a ferocity that sent shivers down our spines. Objects flew through the air, shadows moved with malevolent intent, and an otherworldly chill settled over the apartment. As the battle raged on, I couldn't help but feel a connection to Eleanor, the young woman who had suffered so terribly in the same place I now called home. It was as if her spirit was guiding me, urging me to persevere in the face of unimaginable terror. The battle against the malevolent force would not be won in a single night. It was a war of attrition, a struggle against a darkness that refused to yield. But I was determined to fight until the bitter end, to confront the malevolent force that had plagued the apartment for generations. As I stood on the front lines of this supernatural battle, I couldn't help but wonder if I would emerge victorious, or if I would become just another victim of the malevolent force's insatiable hunger for suffering and despair. The battle against the malevolent force raged on, each day filled with terror and uncertainty. The apartment had become a battleground, a place where the living and the dead clashed in a struggle for dominance. But I was determined not to let the malevolent force claim another victim. With the help of the paranormal experts, we continued our efforts to banish the darkness that had taken hold of the building. We performed rituals, recited incantations, and called upon the spirits of the departed for assistance. It was a relentless and exhausting battle, one that tested the limits of our resolve. As the days turned into weeks, the malevolent force's grip on the apartment seemed to weaken. The shadows that had once lurked in every corner retreated, and the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. It was as if our efforts were finally starting to pay off, as if the malevolent force was losing its hold on the building. But just when it seemed like victory was within reach, the malevolent force fought back with a vengeance. It unleashed a barrage of supernatural attacks, sending objects flying through the air with tremendous force, filling the apartment with a cacophony of ghostly voices, and creating an otherworldly chill that penetrated to the bone. It was during one particularly intense confrontation that I saw her, the apparition of Eleanor Pembroke. She appeared before me, her form ethereal and translucent. Her eyes held a look of profound sadness, as if she were a trapped soul seeking release. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion, "I know what you went through, and I won't let the malevolent force claim me as it did you." Eleanor's spectral form seemed to nod in understanding, and then she pointed towards the diary. It was as if she were urging me to use the diary's secrets against the malevolent force, to break the cycle of torment that had plagued the apartment for generations. With renewed determination, I retrieved the diary and began to read it once more. The later entries, the ones filled with madness and despair, seemed to hold the key. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind as I recited them aloud, hoping to harness their power. "It knows my thoughts. It whispers in my ear," I chanted. "I've tried to leave this place, but it won't let me go. There is no escape, no respite from the torment." As I repeated these words, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere, a change in the energy of the apartment. The malevolent force seemed to recoil, its hold weakening with each passing moment. Emboldened by this breakthrough, I continued to recite the diary's words, my voice growing stronger with each repetition. The paranormal experts joined in, their voices blending with mine in a chorus of defiance. The malevolent force fought back with one final surge of power, unleashing a torrent of supernatural fury. But we held our ground, our determination unwavering. With a deafening roar, the malevolent force was banished from the apartment, its presence vanishing like smoke in the wind. As the dust settled and the apartment returned to a state of calm, I knew that we had won the battle against the malevolent force. Eleanor's suffering had finally come to an end, and the apartment was free from the darkness that had plagued it for generations. But the victory came at a cost. I knew that I could never truly escape the memories of the haunting, the terror that had consumed my life. The malevolent force had left its mark on me, a scar that would never fully heal. As I stood in the now peaceful apartment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Eleanor Pembroke's spirit seemed to linger for a moment, her spectral form bathed in a soft, ethereal light. She nodded in gratitude, her eyes filled with a profound sadness, and then she faded away, her presence finally finding peace. I knew that I could never forget the horrors I had witnessed, the battles I had fought, and the price I had paid for confronting the malevolent force. But I was determined to move forward, to make the apartment a place of light and hope, a place where the darkness of the past would never hold sway again. As I closed the diary and placed it back on the shelf, I couldn't help but wonder about the countless other places in the world that held their own terrifying secrets, waiting to be uncovered by unsuspecting souls. I had faced the horrors of the past head-on, and though I had emerged scared, I was now armed with the knowledge that some secrets were never meant to be known, some mysteries were never meant to be unraveled, and some places were best left unexplored. And so, I began the process of healing and rebuilding, determined to make the apartment a place of safety and solace. The malevolent force had been banished, but its legacy would forever be a part of my life, a reminder that sometimes the line between the living and the dead is thinner than we could ever imagine, and that the horrors of the past have a way of reaching out to claim us, no matter how far we try to run. In the aftermath of the malevolent force's banishment, I set out to transform my apartment into a place of light and hope. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to leave behind the haunting that had consumed my life. I began by cleansing the space, performing rituals to purify the apartment of any lingering negative energy. Sage smudging, salt barriers, and prayers filled the rooms with positive vibrations. It was as if the very act of cleansing the apartment helped to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon it. The paranormal experts who had assisted me in the battle against the malevolent force continued to offer their support. They conducted further investigations to ensure that the haunting had been fully eradicated and their findings were reassuring. The apartment was finally free from the malevolent presence that had plagued it for generations. As the days turned into weeks, the nightmares that had once tormented me began to fade. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the apartment lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. It was as if the building itself had been reborn, no longer burdened by the darkness of its past. But I knew that true healing would take time. The scars left by the haunting ran deep, and I couldn't simply erase the memories of the terror I had endured. I sought therapy and support groups for those who had experienced paranormal trauma, finding solace in the stories of others who had faced similar horrors. I also continued to research the history of the apartment building, determined to uncover any lingering secrets that might have contributed to the haunting. What I discovered was a tragic tale of abuse and neglect, a story that had been buried beneath the sands of time. The boarding house that had once occupied the building had been a place of suffering for the women who had sought refuge within its walls. The malevolent force that had tormented Eleanor Pembroke and countless others had been a manifestation of the building's dark history, a reflection of the cruelty and neglect that had occurred within its confines. But I refused to let the past define the future of the apartment. With each passing day, I worked to fill the space with positive energy, to create an environment that was welcoming and safe. I redecorated the rooms, filled them with light and color, and surrounded myself with mementos of hope and happiness. I also reached out to the community, organizing events and gatherings for the building's residents. It was a way of forging connections and fostering a sense of community, a way of ensuring that the apartment building would no longer be a place of isolation and despair. As time went on, the apartment truly began to feel like home. The nightmares became less frequent. The chilling whispers that had once filled the air were replaced by laughter and conversation, and the shadows that had once lurked in the corners of the rooms were banished by the warmth of the living. I couldn't help but think of Eleanor Pembroke, the young woman whose torment had bound our fates together. I hoped that wherever her spirit now resided, it had found the peace and release that had eluded her in life. She had played a crucial role in helping me confront the malevolent force and find closure, and for that, I would be eternally grateful. But I also knew that the apartment would never be completely free from the haunting's legacy. The scars of the past would always be a part of its history, a reminder that some secrets were never meant to be known, some mysteries were never meant to be unraveled, and some places were best left unexplored. As I stood in my transformed apartment, surrounded by the warmth and light that had replaced the darkness of the past, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey I had undertaken. It had been a harrowing experience, one that had tested my resolve and pushed me to the brink of despair. But it had also been a journey of self-discovery, a journey that had allowed me to confront the darkest corners of my own soul and emerge stronger on the other side. The apartment was no longer a place of terror and torment. It was a place of healing and hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable horrors. And as I looked to the future, I knew that I could finally leave behind the haunting that had once consumed my life and embrace the promise of a new beginning. Life in the apartment had returned to a semblance of normalcy. The nightmares had become a distant memory, and the oppressive atmosphere that had once hung over the building had been replaced by a sense of calm. But I couldn't forget the haunting that had consumed my life, nor could I ignore the lessons it had taught me. I had learned that some mysteries were better left unsolved, some secrets were better left buried, and some places were better left unexplored. The apartment had been a crucible of terror, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead had blurred, and the horrors of the past had reached out to claim me. But it had also been a place of transformation, a place where I had confronted the darkest corners of my own soul and emerged stronger for it. The malevolent force that had plagued the apartment had been banished, but its legacy would forever be a part of my life. A reminder that the past had a way of reaching out to claim us, no matter how far we try to run. I continued to maintain a connection with the paranormal experts who had assisted me in the battle against the malevolent force. Together, we documented our experiences and shared our findings with the wider paranormal community. Our story served as a cautionary tale, a warning to those who sought to delve into the unknown. I also reached out to others who had experienced paranormal trauma, offering support and guidance to those who had faced similar horrors. It was a way of turning my own suffering into a source of strength, a way of helping others find the courage to confront their own hauntings. But perhaps the most profound lesson I had learned was the power of resilience and the capacity of the human spirit to overcome even the most harrowing of experiences. The apartment had been a place of darkness, but it had also been a place of transformation, a place where I had discovered the depths of my own strength. As I looked to the future, I knew that the apartment's legacy would live on in my heart and in the hearts of those who had shared in the battle against the malevolent force. It was a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable terror, there was always hope. There was always the possibility of redemption, and there was always the chance to emerge from the darkness into the light. The haunting had been a chapter in my life, a chapter filled with terror and despair, but also one filled with courage and resilience. It had taught me that the human spirit was capable of enduring even the most horrific of trials and emerging stronger on the other side. And as I stood in the transformed apartment, surrounded by the warmth and light that had replaced the darkness of the past, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. The haunting had been a crucible of terror, but it had also been a crucible of transformation, a crucible that had tested my resolve and pushed me to the brink of despair, only to emerge stronger and more resilient than I had ever thought possible. The apartment was no longer a place of fear and torment. It was a place of healing and hope, a testament to the indomitable nature of the human spirit. And as I looked to the future, I knew that I could finally leave behind the haunting that had once consumed my life and embrace the promise of a new beginning.